Hey everyone, welcome to the video. My name's Steve, and if you're new to my channel, these videos are all about digging deeper on the cost of ownership. That was my Porsche 992 Carrera II, which is now left. And in today's video, I'm going to take a look at the alternative cars available for the Porsche C2 £86,000 base price. Now, since that car left, I have had a month or two to have a little bit think about where I was wanting to go, and I decided the best thing to do was really to do what I usually do, and that is to go out and scout new cars via Auto Trader, just checking over the criteria that I was kind of looking for in the next vehicle. Now, I didn't really want to part with the 992. I really enjoyed that car. I loved it. I would have kept it, but market conditions at the minute allowed me to exit that car at a certain value. And if you haven't seen that video, I'll put it in the description below, but it is going to be the start of a playlist of videos of me exploring what else is out there before I make a decision about what I'm going to buy next. I originally ended up in the 992 C2 because I had come into the Porsche brand via the 718 Cayman entry model. I thoroughly enjoyed that car, but if you, again, have watched other videos, you'll know that I parted with that car originally because I needed the money to finance rental properties. After all those rental properties were in place, I went into the 992 because I always wanted a 911. I'd always admired the 911s. I loved the wide body. It was the model for me, and I decided to take the plunge into the next step up. Now, since I decided to part with that car at a market value that I really didn't expect at the time that I sold it, I'm sitting here with my original finance money back, wondering where I can go next. What can I roll it into? What else is available? Because when I bought the 992, I never stopped and looked around to see what else there was at that price point. I didn't do what I did when I was buying the Cayman and looked all around the market to see what was available for what I could afford. I just wanted a 992, put my deposit down and carried on. Now, to narrow down what my options would be and what's probably available on the market, I've got to take a look at similar comparisons when it comes to criteria. Now, the 992 or the 911 range itself are sports cars, the two-door coupes, essentially they're 2+2s, but a minimum of a two-seater would do. I'm also looking for something around that 385 PS mark. 0 to 60 is not as important to me, but it was around the 4.2, so anything faster or around the same would also be acceptable. And the final thing is I'm looking for these cars to be in and around the £87,000 mark on the RRP. From looking at all of that, I have come up with a list of 10 options, 2 or 3 which are just on the outside of the criteria, but I'm going to include them anyway, just for the sake of variety. Before I start, one last thing. If I have missed any cars that you think I should have taken a look at and didn't come up in my search, or maybe you're in a different country and you have access to stuff that I couldn't think of that maybe isn't available in my dealer network, stick it in the comments below. I'm interested to know what you would see as an alternative, what you might look at if you weren't going to buy a Porsche 992. Kicking off in no particular order, I am going to take my first look at the BMW M4 Competition. Now, hitting the BMW website here, I'm familiar with some of these websites because I spend quite a lot of time looking at them, but they seem to change and update quite a lot all the time. The BMW one is quite easy to navigate, so we hit models, hit M, and there we go. Straight underneath there, we have the M4 Competition Coupe coming from £76,115, and I believe that is the on-the-road price. That is the new BMW. It's got the new odd shaped grille that everybody's made comments about, but I do quite like its stance. I do like these wheel arches. I do like the rear end on that, and that particular color is quite interesting. You can see it's quite highly spec. It's got all the sports seats, all the buttons on the steering wheel, paddles, digital dash. You do get a better look at it when you go through the configurator, but will not hang around too much on each of these websites. So you can see it looks quite highly spec'd. It's got quite a lot there, and they make a big song and dance here about the HP and the 0 to 62 time. It does hit that power point, it does hit the 0 to 60, and it is within the price point that I'm looking for. And I have seen some on Auto Trader where dealers have been selling them in stock less than the RRP, so that's a deal. It's interesting. Not sure about the color. I have looked into the configurator, and I'm not going to go into it in depth, but it looks like quite a lot of things come on the car as part of the price, but there are charges to change over metallic paint, things like that. Now, while I was loitering on the BMW website, I did have a little look to see if there was anything else, just looking around the BMW website itself, not on Auto Trader, and something that came up was the 8 Series. Now, I've gone to the 840i because that's where the price point is. I did have a look at the M8, and if we take a quick look at the M8, you'll find that jumping down here to take a look at it, starting price on that car is £126,000, so it's way outside of the criteria when it comes to price. What we're really looking at is the 840i. It really doesn't carry the exterior features over from the M4, but the interior, in part, steering wheel, center console here with the gear lever and things, maybe it's not the screen, but the general ethos of the design inside there is fairly similar, although I would say this is a little bit more of a GT cruising car rather than something I would class as a two-seater sports like a 911. So although I've got it on my list at the end, it doesn't quite fall within the power and the 0 to 60 and things, and it is a large car, so I'll probably discount this one, but it is on the list and I have taken a look at it. Now, the third car in the list that I did want to take a look at and I know fits in with the price point and power, etc., is the Jaguar F-Type. Now, I think that car is on its facelift design now because it does look a little bit different to what I remember it looking like when it came out. If I'm wrong, correct me. We've got a little bit of a list there, and under sports car, which is what we're looking for, we have that F-Type, and you can see that it comes in there at the £55,000 mark. So looking at this car after scrolling down there, you can see that it's actually quite a pretty looking car. We can see if we're spinning it around, I actually think that's a very nice looking car. I have liked them quite a lot since they first came out, and I do think they've changed the front end a little bit since it first originally hit the scene. I like the back end, I like the exhaust, I just like the stance. I think it's a nice car. So if we head to the model page, the car that I'm actually looking at when it comes to price comparison is this F-Type R Dynamic Coupe. It's on the road from £58,000, but this specific P450RWD, which is the rear-wheel drive model in automatic, does come in with the quite quick acceleration time, and it's got the 450 on the PS. So the next car, and the only car from this brand that I think actually falls into the category of being similar when it comes to criteria, is an Audi, and it is the RS5 Coupe. Now, if we head over to the model page on Audi, getting down here to the Coupe version of the cars we're looking for, we've got a couple of different options here when it comes to the A5, but the one we're picking out here is the RS5 Coupe, starting at £69,000. Again, like a lot of the other websites and the current problems that are going on in the world, there is a jumping up pop-up box that tells us about the global supply chain, and so there we go. This is the RS5. Looks quite aggressive. I would say that sort of colour spec reminds me of the GTS models in the Porsche range, where we've got the blacked out wheels and sort of blacked out trims around the windows and things. Looks a bit more aggressive, a bit sportier. We've got the power, we've got the 0 to 60 time. And what we are looking at is this model here, which is the second in the range. Comes pretty fully loaded, this car. It's very similar to the M4. It's got really nice quilted looking interior centers on the seats there. You do have the 2+2 at the back. And again, I would say the layout of the console and everywhere, you've got that sort of chunky automatic selector in the middle. Got the paddles on the wheel, all the buttons. So the Audi RS5, it comes under at the price point. It is higher on the PS. It also is quicker to 0 to 60, and I think it comes fairly fully loaded, and it looks quite aggressive. Next in at number 5, and it's a car that excites me quite a lot, and it's something that you used to see some of them on the roads here, but there'd always be imports and left-hand drives. But now that they've released them here in right-hand drive, something's a little bit more attractive, and I do see a few of them on the road now, especially the 5 litre, and that is the Ford Mustang. Now, if we're coming on the Ford website, you can see again, you've got the pop-up at the bottom, and they do say specifically due to semiconductor shortages, you've got a delivery time wait. But if we go into vehicles, you've got a drop down here of all their standard cars, which starts out with the small hatchbacks and things. But if we go down and we find it under M, there we go, Ford Mustang. Now, that is the on-the-road retail price for one of the base models. What I'm actually looking at when it comes to it is this first one that comes up on the page here, which I believe the model Ford Mustang Mach-1. Now, I think that is a very sporty, aggressive looking car, and you can see them side by side there when it comes to looking at the colours and sort of the aggressive stance on it. So if we spin down there, you can see that this is just the fastback, and you've got a 450 PS and a 4.9 second on the 0 to 60. So now in comparison to the 992, I think the Ford Mustang is generally classed as a muscle car, isn't it? So I wouldn't put it side by side as something as I would say is an alternative to the 992. But when you look at the power, you look at the speed, and you look at probably the value for money when it comes to cost versus the options on the car, and I have heard these cars go past in the street, the 5-litre versions, I am excited by this car. I do like its looks, and I do think it looks interesting. So it's something I would like to have a demonstration drive in. Now, number 6 on my list is something I wouldn't probably usually have gravitated towards. And I do know they make the odd sports car, but it's never been a brand that I've really been massively attracted to, and that is Lexus. And the car I'm looking at is the LC500. Now, if we find it on the Lexus website, that is the car there, and its starting out price is just under £82,000. Now, I think when I've looked through, I haven't been able to confirm really if that's an on-the-road price or whether it's before tax. So we dig a little bit round into the website. It's not the easiest website to work from, but I've gone into the models and we're into price and specification. The car that I'm actually looking at as a comparison here when it comes to price, which is just under the 87,000 mark, is this LC500 Sport Pack. Interestingly, it comes with carbon fiber roof. The car itself, I think, is quite attractive. I think it looks a little bit futuristic, and I don't mind it so much, but when you look at the dimensions of the car, it is quite a long car in comparison to a 992. With there being a higher price point there, very close to 992, based on looks and things, it's not something I would personally probably gravitate towards, but I have put it on the list because it did fit the criteria. We step back into the world of German brands. The only one that I haven't visited is Mercedes, and there were 2 models there that I found. We'll do one after the other. When you get through to the models page, we hit AMG, because that is the sort of car we're looking for, a little bit like the RS and the M in the BMW. So we've got 2 choices here, and I'll take a look at them one at a time. The first one is probably fairly close in sort of stance and size, etc., to the 992, and that's coming in the on-the-road price at 57,000. That is this C-Class Coupe. Now, if we jump in there and take a look at it, based on it being a C63S, which is what I'd probably be taking a look at, you're getting in there at the 3.9 seconds and 510 horsepower. If we blow up the pictures and come in here and take a look at it from the outside, again, we've got all the blacked out wheels. It's quite an attractive shape. There's nothing offensive about it. Inside the interior, again, we've got this large sort of automatic handle. They're still hanging around with this screen in the middle of the dash rather than it being integrated into the actual fascia, which I'm not a big fan of. I don't really like these things. Look like they've been plonked on the top like an iPad. We've got the buttons on all the steering wheels. There is a little bit of ambient lighting going on here in the doors. If we take a jump back to the main page again where I was looking at the alternative, this is the alternative. It is the E-Class Coupe. On the road price is starting at 68. It's a bigger car. I'm not as attracted to the shape of that car, and I would definitely put that side by side with the 840, like I say. So I think those 2 cars, although they're hitting sort of the criteria of what I'm looking for, they're not something I would really put side by side with the 992 as an alternative. So they're there. I've included them, but I'm just going to gloss past this one. So the last one that I've found that is a brand that I wouldn't usually go towards, is not something I've really ever been attracted to beforehand, is Lotus. Now, if we hit the Lotus website, you'll find that the first thing that comes up there on the homepage now is this new Emira. Now, as we scroll through those images that have popped up there on the rotation, I do think that car looks very Ferrari-ish in its design. However, that car, I can't really find any details on it when it comes to be able to check things like insurance and stuff, because it isn't out yet. It looks like it's going to be available from the middle of next year, and I can see that on YouTube there's a lot of other YouTubers who've got pre-orders on these things, and I am interested in it, but I don't think that it's something I'm going to be able to get my hands on. So on the actual Lotus range, or something that is available probably to me, is the Evora. Now, if we head away from the main page and I go in here, we can have a look at the models, and this is the list. Obviously, you've got the Elise and the Exige. The Evora is here. When we come in here, the first thing that hits us is the price, while it's waiting to load up, at £86,000. However, as the thing counts down at the bottom, you can see that we're hitting a 4-second 0 to 60, and it's not an unattractive car, but for me, the only thing that puts me off this car mainly when it comes to Lotuses, I don't think it's going to be very practical for me as something as a daily driver. Screams a little bit more track car towards me and something that I wouldn't want to live with on a daily basis. Now, last but not least, and I've deliberately left it to the end because I didn't want to compare like for like in the same range, but is the Porsche 718 GTS 4 litre. Now, I've included that car because I have mentioned it before, and it is something that I am personally looking at as an alternative, because I don't want to leave the Porsche brand, but I also probably might not want to order just another 992, especially for the reasons that the waiting list at the minute is starting to get quite long after I've just checked with the dealer. So if we head in here and we take a look at the 718 range and we go in there, obviously we've got options of GT4s and things. GT4 to me wouldn't be something I would want to use daily, but if we head in and we go have a look right down the other end and find the GTS 4 litre, coming in there with the starting price at 65,000 and a bit. Now that price is obviously not on the road. There's going to be some road tax on there, so you stick another £2,000 on, you're coming in at 67. If you want to stick it in from a manual to the automatic PDK, you're sticking in about another 2,000 on. So we're hitting around the £70,000 mark when it comes in at the on the road price. Now we're taking a look at the bottom specs on there. We're getting 400 PS. A little bit slower on the 4.5, but I believe that'll be the manual, not the automatic. So if we take a look at the configuration, so after jumping in the configurator, so we can take a look at the difference between the manual and the PDK. On that manual, you've got 4.5 seconds for the 0 to 60, but you head over to the PDK and it is 4 seconds. Plus the fuel consumption does seem to look like it's a little bit higher with the PDK. If I was to stay within the Porsche range, that is probably the car I would go for if I'm not getting another 992. It's got similar power. I know it's not exactly the same car because it's designed slightly differently, but I like to try the things. I am familiar with that 718, but I did go in at the entry-level car. I think I would generally like to try the GTS and see what it is like in difference, and then also I can make a comparison between that and the 992 when it comes to owning it and running it on a daily basis. So after hitting all of those cars, running through the list, here's the final Excel sheet at the end with all the comparable information on. I'm not going to dig too much into it. I'll put it on the screen, leave it there for a minute or two while we discuss it. But what we've got is a comparison of the price. If it's been on the road, I put a Y next to it so you can see what the differences are and where they're not. Comparing the 0 to 60s, comparing the PS or the HP, depending on which one was spec'd on the website. And then we've got a comparison of sort of lengths and sizes and widths, because I do think that is important. Now, I have checked out the insurances, and to be honest with you, they're all a little bit all over the place. But when I do a comparison based on my circumstances, the biggest comparison I could find was the same insurer across most of the cars, and that for me was Admiral. It was on my 992, and most of these cars are coming in spec'd around about the same price as what the 992 cost. However, there was one car out of that range that was a smidge cheaper on the insurance than the rest of them, and that car was the BMW M4 Competition. So we can see there that it's Admiral in the middle, and at the top above it, these ones require me to have little boxes in to track my telemetry, which I wouldn't do. So the next first available one is the Admiral one, which came in just under £700. But believe it or not, the one car that came back a little bit silly was this one, and it's the Audi. Now, even with the box in, we're looking at £1,000 marking the telemetry with Admiral. But if we go down to the bottom of that screenshot, you can see that we're looking at £1,400. Now, I don't know whether that car's desperately desirable for thieves in my area or whether they've had a lot of people crash those cars. But for whatever reason, that one sticks out at nearly double what the rest of them are for the insurance with the same insurer. I would probably only go for 4 or 5 out of that list now that I've looked at what the options are. I am now going to take a look in a future video what the actual included options are as part of the on-the-road price. Look forward to that one. If you've got any alternative cars, stick them in the comments, and I'll see you again in the next car to take a look at the used market.